Hi there, I'm Mara. This Thanksgiving, while the turkey was still warm and the pies untouched, my mother stood up in front of everyone and said, "We voted, and you're no longer family." I thought I was prepared for anything, but nothing prepares you for being erased by the people who raised you. What pushes a family to abandon one of their own? Have you ever been left out by the ones you trusted most? Where are you watching from tonight? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. The sky over Bend was already bruised purple when I turned into the old gravel driveway. The tires crunched under me, slow and reluctant, as if the car itself understood what my heart refused to admit. It had been 6 years since I'd last been here. 6 Thanksgivings skipped under polite excuses, under the guise of being too busy, too far. Now I was back, clutching a homemade apple pie on my lap, pretending the cold in the air wasn't seeping into my bones. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the white paint flaking in soft curls from the porch railing. A tired wreath hung crooked on the front door. I sat for a long minute, engine ticking as it cooled, gathering myself. Inside, laughter rose, a sharp, familiar lilt that didn't quite reach the edges of warmth. I breathed in the smell of wood smoke, of turkey roasting, of something sweet and cinnamon-laced drifting from the kitchen. It should have felt like home. It didn't. I pushed the door open and stepped into the glow of the living room. Heads turned. A chorus of, "Hey, you made it," floated over the murmur of conversations, but none of them quite touched me. Hugs were quick, distracted, bodies leaning in without warmth. My mother's smile was brittle as she took the pie from my hands, setting it down without comment among the spread on the side table. I drifted toward the kitchen, feeling the strange gravity of the house pull at me, an invisible hand on the small of my back, nudging me to sit down, to blend in, to disappear. I stopped just before crossing the threshold, adjusting the sleeve of my sweater. That's when I heard it. "Who's gonna eat that?" Amber's voice, pitched low but not low enough. Probably half-baked, just like everything else she tries to do. A few stifled chuckles. Calvin's laugh, loud and sudden like a dropped glass. My hands stilled on the edge of the counter. I stared at the pie, golden, imperfect, a little cracked across the top where the filling had bubbled up, and I felt something crack in me too. It was small, almost inaudible, like the first splinter of ice on a frozen lake. I turned away quietly, pretending I hadn't heard. Pretending was something I had learned to do expertly over the years. Later, as chairs scraped across the hardwood and silverware clinked against china, I caught snippets again. Calvin, leaning in toward Owen with a grin, whispering, $5 says she bails before dessert." Owen laughed politely. Others glanced over, amused, not cruel exactly, worse. Casual, indifferent. Like I was a running joke they barely remembered the punchline to. I sat at the edge of the room, invisible. The humiliation wasn't sharp. It didn't pierce like it once might have. No, it spread slowly, a quiet frost under my skin, numbing me with its familiarity. I remembered other pies, other Thanksgivings, birthday cakes I had stayed up all night to bake, handwritten cards tucked under napkin rings, all of it unnoticed, or worse, noticed and dismissed. Maybe I was never really part of it. Maybe I was just a guest who had overstayed her welcome, a faded decoration someone forgot to take down after the party ended. I pressed my palm flat against the table's worn surface, grounding myself. Not this time. This time, I wouldn't pretend. I wouldn't laugh along with their jokes or smooth over the awkward silences. This time, I would watch. I would see everything they thought they hid so well. This time, I wouldn't pretend not to see. The guest bedroom smelled like dust and old linen. I closed the door behind me, the click louder than I intended, then leaned my forehead against the wood for a breath longer than necessary. The laughter still floated down the hallway, muffled by walls but sharp enough to slice through the fragile barrier I tried to build around myself. I tossed my jacket onto the edge of the narrow bed, sat down heavily, and pulled out my phone. It buzzed weakly in my hand, almost like an apology. A single notification blinked back at me, the family group chat. My heart lifted for a ridiculous second. Scrolling up, I saw it. My message, sent that morning. "Do you need me to bring anything?" Marked as seen, by everyone. No reply. The screen blurred slightly as my vision swam, a cold pressure building behind my eyes. I locked the phone and set it face down on the nightstand like it had betrayed me, Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe everyone was just busy. Maybe... But the hollow ache in my chest knew better. I lay back against the lumpy pillow, staring up at the ceiling fan that spun slowly, clicking with each lazy turn. Shadows pooled in the corners of the room, and I thought about all the other holidays where my offers to help had been missed, my efforts sidelined. How many times had I told myself it was an accident? How many times had I pretended not to notice the pattern? A sharp giggle outside the door snapped me from my thoughts. "I can't believe she doesn't know about the real family chat," Tessa's voice sang, light and cruel. Another peal of laughter. The floor under my bed seemed to tilt. Real family chat. The words echoed in my ears, each syllable heavier than the last. I sat up too fast, the blood rushing from my head. I pressed my hand against the mattress, grounding myself against the nausea that rose in my throat. They had built an entire world without me. Planned, joked, arranged, without even pretending I was part of it. I stood up, the floor cold against my bare feet. The sounds of the house, clinking glasses, the clatter of silverware, low murmurs, washed over me, familiar and alien all at once. It wasn't just this year. It had never been an oversight. It had always been a choice. I wrapped my arms around myself, squeezing tight as if I could hold the pieces together for one more night. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Not tomorrow, during the carefully orchestrated chaos of Thanksgiving dinner. Tomorrow, I would sit at their table. I would smile when expected, nod at the right moments, but I would not belong to them anymore. Not in the way they thought, not in the way I had foolishly hoped. Tomorrow, I would watch. Tomorrow, I would finally stop making excuses for them. The house woke before I did. Clatters and laughter drifted up through the floorboards, weaving into my restless dreams until I opened my eyes to the pale light of Thanksgiving morning. I stayed there for a while under the thin quilt, staring at the cracks spidering across the ceiling, listening. It was easier to pretend, even just for a moment, that today might be different. That somewhere between the pies and the casseroles, someone would look up and really see me. I dressed quietly and made my way downstairs, heart thudding in time with the kitchen commotion. The smell of pumpkin and cinnamon coated the air, familiar and heavy. In the kitchen, everyone bustled around each other like a well-rehearsed dance. Amber barked orders while Tessa and Calvin laughed over a spilled bag of marshmallows. No one glanced up as I stepped into the room. I reached for a cup of coffee. My hand brushed the pot just as Amber swooped in, grabbing it first without noticing or caring that I was there. I stepped back, the cool tile sharp under my bare feet, and folded my arms across my chest. Outside, someone called for everyone to gather for the annual family photo. Jackets were thrown on, scarves half-tied, a parade of cheerful chaos spilling onto the frost-tipped lawn. I followed, hanging back, unsure where to slot myself into the picture. Tessa took charge, as she always did, waving everyone into place. Amber linked arms with Calvin and Dad, the cousins clumped together, laughing about something I wasn't close enough to hear. I hovered at the edge, waiting, hoping. "Okay, say cheese," Tessa called out, already snapping the photo before I could move closer. A crisp click of the shutter, and it was done. A family memory etched without me. No one noticed I wasn't in it. No one called me over. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, pretending the sting in my chest was just the bite of the cold November air. Later back inside, I scrolled through my phone while everyone buzzed around the dining table. Tessa had already posted the photo to her feed. "So thankful for family," the caption read, peppered with little heart emojis. I stared at the screen. They had cropped me out. It wasn't subtle, my arm, my shoulder, gone, as if I had never been standing there at all. My throat tightened, and for a moment I thought I might actually laugh. It was almost funny how cleanly they managed to erase me. I thought about every birthday photo, every holiday card, every memory where I'd stood just a little too far to the side, a little too easy to cut away. It had never been an accident. It had always been a choice. I set the phone down, feeling the anger bloom slow and steady under my skin. Not a flash, but a simmer, something hotter, something sharper. They could crop me out of pictures. They wouldn't crop me out of their memories so easily. The kitchen buzzed with the hum of Thanksgiving Day preparations. Pans clattered, timers beeped, Voices overlapped in a tangled mess of stories and orders and laughter that somehow never quite reached me. I kept to the edges, filling glasses with water, smoothing napkins, moving quietly enough not to interrupt the rhythm they already had without me. The air smelled thick of roasted turkey and sweet yams, but it felt colder near the back of the house, where a draft crept in through the old windows. I pulled my sweater tighter, grateful for something to do with my hands. Someone called out about seating arrangements, and the family shuffled into the dining room. Amber was orchestrating it all, arranging name cards at the long decorated table like pieces on a chessboard. I hovered just outside the doorway, waiting for a signal, a nod, something that said I belonged. When I finally stepped forward, scanning the table, I noticed it immediately. Beautiful cursive names handwritten on creamy paper at every place setting. Every seat accounted for, except one. Mine. There was a chair, technically, tucked at the far end of the table, near the swinging door to the kitchen where the draft was strongest. No name card, no plate yet. Just a chair, half turned away from the table, as if it had been added at the last minute for someone they hoped wouldn't show. My face burned. I walked slowly to the seat, forcing my legs to move, and sat down. From here, the conversations floated above me, around me, but never to me. I was close enough to hear, but too far to belong. Then the front door opened, and the cold rushed in. Calvin's old co-worker, a man I barely recognized, stepped inside, brushing snow from his jacket. Amber lit up like a Christmas tree, her arms wide as she swept across the room. "You made it!" she beamed, loud enough for the whole house to hear. Without missing a beat, she turned to the dining table, her eyes scanning until they landed on me. "Why don't we move, Mara?" she said, voice breezy, careless. "There's more room by the sliding door." The guest smiled, oblivious to the weight of the words. I stood up automatically, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. No one looked at me as I picked up my plate and glass, moved down to the folding chair they set up awkwardly by the sliding door, where every time someone went outside, the icy air would pour straight onto my back. I sat down again, lower this time, the seat wobbly and cold. The window beside me rattled against the frame, and the smell of roasted turkey felt suddenly sour. I stared at my plate without seeing it, the clinking silverware and muffled laughter swelling and receding like the tide. I thought about all the times I had been the afterthought, the extra place setting, the late invitation, the forgotten birthday wish. It wasn't an accident, it never had been. I had always been seated at the edge of their lives, tucked away where I wouldn't disturb the picture they wanted to paint. I sat there, my hands stiff in my lap, letting the cold sink deep into my skin. Maybe they were right all along. Maybe there had never been a seat here meant for me. The dining room pulsed with noise, a wall of laughter and forks clinking against china that somehow seemed to mute itself the moment I sat down. Plates were passed, wine glasses were refilled, conversations overlapped in messy waves, flowing easily around me, but never toward me. I folded my hands in my lap, careful to smile when a stray glance fell my way, careful to keep breathing. The smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and fresh rolls saturated the air, so thick it clung to the back of my throat. I swallowed hard, shifting slightly in my flimsy folding chair by the drafty sliding door. That's when I saw it. The tablecloth beneath the heavy dishes and sweating pitchers was familiar, too familiar. A white linen embroidered with delicate blue vines, every stitch pulled by my own hand last December, hours spent hunched over a worn sewing machine in my too-small apartment, thinking maybe, just maybe, a homemade gift would matter more. It didn't. The cloth was stained now, puckered and wrinkled from careless storage. A dark ring of cranberry sauce spread across one corner, a pitcher of soda sweating directly onto the centerpiece I had stitched so carefully. No one said anything about it. No one said anything to me. I stared at the table for a long moment, feeling something tight coil in my chest. I could almost hear the thread snapping, one fiber at a time, somewhere deep inside me. Later, as the plates were cleared and the dessert trays shuffled onto the counter, the family drifted into sharing stories, holidays past, funny memories, the good old days. I cleared my throat lightly, more habit than hope. "I made that tablecloth last year," I said into a lull. Amber barely paused, barely looked. "Oh, we need more coffee," she said brightly, waving Tessa toward the kitchen. And just like that, the moment and I were dismissed. It wasn't just the cloth. It was never just the cloth. I thought of unopened birthday cards left to gather dust on entryway tables, of missed voicemails on Father's Day, of graduations attended by strangers because family had other plans. I thought of the year I sent a carefully wrapped basket of handmade jams for Christmas and received a text 3 weeks later. Got it, thanks. The stories flowed around me again, effortless, unbroken. My name wasn't spoken once. They hadn't just forgotten my gifts. They had forgotten me. I pressed my palms flat against my knees, feeling the strength returning not in a rush, but in a slow, deliberate crawl. I wouldn't offer them anything more, not my time, not my kindness, not my silence. The afternoon wore on, and so did the charade. Plates piled high with food were cleared and replaced with desserts, the room thick with the scent of sugar and cinnamon. Laughter rang out in bursts, but it sounded sharper now, less effortless. It scraped against my skin with every passing hour. I stayed silent, keeping to my little orbit at the edge of the room. I watched, I listened. The cracks beneath their smiles widened until I could almost hear the fabric of the performance ripping apart. I made my way to the kitchen to refill my water glass, weaving through clusters of chattering relatives. As I passed the narrow hallway leading to the back porch, I heard it. "She's only here because she probably needs money again," Calvin said, his voice low and dripping with casual cruelty. The laugh that followed wasn't loud, but it hit me harder than any shout could have. It wasn't just a slip. It wasn't just a moment of thoughtless gossip. It was how they spoke about me when they thought I wasn't listening. I froze, my fingers tightening around the empty glass until my knuckles went white. The walls of the house seemed to tilt slightly, warping under the weight of everything I had tried so hard not to see. I placed the glass back on the counter with careful precision, forcing my hands to unclench, turning away before anyone noticed the crack forming across my face. Later, when the group had shifted toward dessert, Owen found me standing alone by the bay window, pretending to admire the sad string of Christmas lights blinking outside. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice oddly hesitant. "I overheard something earlier. I thought you should know." I met his eyes, wary. He lowered his voice. "I recorded it, what Calvin said, just in case you ever needed it." For a moment, the room spun. Then slowly it settled, a new kind of clarity clicking into place. Owen handed me his phone, the screen opened to a voice memo. I pressed play. The faint background noise buzzed under Calvin's words. Ugly, undeniable. Proof. Real, tangible proof that I wasn't imagining it. That I wasn't overreacting. That their cruelty wasn't some shadow of paranoia dancing at the edge of my vision. It was real, and it had a voice now. I sent the recording to my own drive, fingers steady. In that moment, something in me shifted. I had spent years rationalizing slights, swallowing sharp words like they were meant for me, convincing myself that staying silent was somehow noble. But this was different. They thought they could whisper their poison and it would evaporate. They thought it would dissolve before it ever touched the surface. This time, it wouldn't. This time, it would stain. I slipped Owen's phone back into his hand and nodded once, a silent thank you that carried more weight than any toast raised at that table. For once, they wouldn't just whisper about me. I would make sure they heard themselves loud and clear. The air inside the house felt different now, heavier, stretched too thin. Conversations fractured into shorter bursts, brittle laughter replacing genuine warmth. Every glance across the table carried a sharpness, a calculation, as if everyone was waiting for something or maybe guarding against it. I moved more carefully, tucking myself into quieter corners, becoming smaller in their view, but sharper in my own. I had stopped hoping for kindness. Now, I only collected truths. Near the dessert table, Tessa stood holding court, a glass of wine swaying lazily in her hand. Her voice floated above the buzz, light and teasing. "Remember when Mara stole that necklace from Aunt Linda's room and blamed it on the cleaning lady?" she said, laughing like it was the fondest, funniest thing. The group chuckled, low, conspiratorial. Even Calvin smiled, shaking his head like it was a charming memory of childhood mischief. I froze where I stood, the slice of pumpkin pie on my plate tilting dangerously. My stomach knotted, a cold, coiled thing inside me. That never happened. I remembered the necklace, yes, but I remembered the tears, the accusations, the way no one believed me when I said I hadn't touched it. I remembered the weeks after, the way my parents looked at me differently, like I had morphed into something untrustworthy overnight. I set my plate down, appetite gone, and turned toward the hallway, away from the laughter that felt like knives. A gentle hand brushed my elbow. I looked up into Clara's kind, lined face. "Walk with me," she murmured, so quietly no one else heard. We slipped into the quiet of the front porch, where the cold bit sharper and the sky was already turning indigo. Clara pulled her sweater tighter around her thin frame, her mouth pressed into a line for a long moment before she spoke. "That necklace story," she said, her voice steady but low. "Tessa made it up. She lost it herself. We all knew." I stared at her, the words a slow drip into my frozen bloodstream. "Why?" My voice cracked and I swallowed it back down. "Why didn't anyone say anything?" Clara looked away, out into the growing dark. "It was easier to let you take the fall. You were quieter, less trouble." The world tipped sideways and then righted itself again. Of course they had known. They had chosen silence because silence cost them nothing. It only cost me. Inside, the laughter continued, muffled through the thick walls, the sound of a family celebrating a holiday they had never meant for me. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling something harden and settle inside my chest. Not bitterness exactly, but a kind of understanding that would not bend to them anymore. This wasn't about one Thanksgiving. This was about every time they decided I was easier to lose than to love. By evening, the festive mask had cracked so wide it barely clung to the room. Voices pitched higher, laughter edged sharper, and the air tasted different, like something sour had finally risen to the surface. I sat at the far end of the dining table, a ghost tethered to a seat no one cared to look toward. I wasn't hiding anymore, though. I wasn't shrinking. Every glance I caught, every whisper I half heard, sharpened into a blade I no longer feared holding. Owen sat across from me, a few chairs down. His fork clinked lightly against his plate as he cleared his throat, the sound cutting clean through the rising static. "You know," he said, voice even but carrying across the crowded room, "it's strange how one person here seems to be treated so differently." The words didn't crash like a wave. They slipped under the table, coiling around ankles, tightening slowly. A hush fell, thick and suffocating. All heads turned slightly, just enough to glance at each other, at Amber, never directly at me. Amber's smile froze, a polished, brittle thing, before she set her wineglass down a little too hard. "We don't air private matters in front of outsiders," she said sharply, her voice slicing the air thinner than the turkey carving knife had earlier. Her eyes flicked around the table like warning shots. One by one they obeyed, forks resumed moving, conversations shifted awkwardly, shoulders stiffened with the effort of pretending everything was still fine. The shame didn't burn this time. It didn't even sting. It just settled, heavy and final, across the table like a second, invisible tablecloth no one could lift. I didn't look at Owen, but I felt the apology in his silence. I didn't need it. His truth had already done its work. I sat back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap, feeling the cold draft from the window chill the sweat on my skin. They had demanded loyalty without offering it. They had insisted on silence as the price of admission into a family that had never truly opened its doors to me. They hadn't just failed me. They had chosen, again and again, to erase me when it was convenient, to remember me only when they needed something softer to blame. I understood now. I accepted it, but I would not carry it anymore. While the others distracted themselves with pie and second helpings, I quietly reached under the table and slid my purse into my lap. One by one, I placed my napkin down, pushed my chair back slowly. They wanted a scapegoat. I would give them a ghost instead. The night settled thick over Bend, wrapping the house in a silence so dense it felt like wading through fog. The dinner plates had been cleared, the desserts half-eaten and forgotten, and still, no one quite met my eyes. Amber stood then, her wineglass catching the muted chandelier light. "We voted," she said, her voice as crisp and final as the first crack of ice on a frozen lake. "And you're no longer family." The words hovered for a moment, suspended between us all. A ripple of awkward shifting ran through the table, forks set down, hands folding into laps, but no one spoke. Not Dad, not Tessa, not Calvin, no one. The thread that had barely tethered me to them for years finally snapped. but it didn't make a sound. It didn't shatter into 1,000 messy pieces. It simply unraveled, quietly and cleanly, as if it had always been meant to break. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound louder than anything else in the room. I stood without a word, the world narrowing into sharp, weightless clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I looked at each of them in turn, the faces I once knew better than my own reflection, faces I had memorized at birthdays, at graduations, at funerals, faces I had missed during years apart. I didn't recognize them anymore. Maybe I never had. I slipped my jacket on, sliding my arms into the worn sleeves like armor. I picked up my purse, heavier with memories than essentials, each movement deliberate, unhurried. The door creaked as I opened it, the cold night air rushing in to greet me, brisk and clean in my lungs. I didn't look back, not once. As I stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards groaned underfoot, the sound so achingly familiar it almost broke me. But I kept moving. They were never going to choose me. I had to choose myself. The deepest wound wasn't their rejection. It was the slow realization that I had been clinging to a hollow illusion, patching up old cracks, pretending the foundation was still sound long after the termites had hollowed it out. I paused at the edge of the porch, breathing in the sharpness of the November air, feeling it slice away the last strands of guilt and hope and desperate belonging. I wasn't broken, I was free. I crossed the yard, my boots crunching softly over the frost-hardened ground. Every step away from them felt lighter. Every step toward the dark, open road felt like breathing for the first time. Maybe healing isn't about making peace with them. Maybe it's about making peace with the parts of me they refuse to see. A bittersweet smile touched my lips, small and real. I stepped into the night, into the silence, carrying only what mattered. Myself. Sometimes, the people we call family teach us the hardest lessons about love, loyalty, and letting go. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's that real belonging doesn't come from forcing yourself into spaces that were never built for you. It comes from choosing yourself, even when it feels like the loneliest road. Healing isn't about winning them back. It's about realizing you were never broken to begin with. It's about making peace with your own heart, standing up when no one claps, walking away even when your legs are shaking. What about you? Have you ever had to step away from people you once called family? Or learn to heal without the apology you deserved? I'd love to hear your story. If this video touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. I welcome all honest conversations here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, raw, and healing stories just like this. Your story matters, and I can't wait to share the next chapter together.